Hey,
Bingo.
Boston. Hey, Boston buddies. Welcome to Brunch with the Boston Buddies. It is Tuesday, April 28th, 2020. Today we have special guest Larry Rawson, longtime announcer of the Boston Marathon, ESPN track and field announcer, Emmy Award winner as well. He has announced 43 Boston marathons and over 100 marathons when you include Chicago, Boston, and New York together. So welcome, Larry. How are you doing?
Vince, I'm great. I'm great. I decided with that very nice introduction. Thank you. When you said 100 of them, I should probably come on and say, thank you very much. As
Sorry.
an old person. But
So,
anyway, it's great to be with you and your audience too, which of course I respect enormously.
yes, you are part of the Boston Buddies. You're in the book. You're one of us.
An honor.
Yes, I appreciate that. So one of the things we always ask people is their intro video, right? And what made you get into basically broadcasting, especially Boston, because you were not even in this field prior to your broadcasting career, correct?
No, that's correct. I was a runner in high school, and we started very late. I actually petitioned the coach to start a hockey team, the principal, and he said, no, we're not going to do that. He gave me the reasons and paused and said, my junior year, we're going to start a track team. He was a great coach. I, looking back, had ability, but he brought me along really well, and I wound up running in college. I ran on the Marine Corps team for a couple of years, served over in Vietnam as a Marine lieutenant, and got out and then stopped running competitively at that point. And I would always go to the finish line of the Boston marathons, and by accident stumbled into the broadcast booth when I, at commercial break, gave one of the radio stations there the right information on Neil Cusack, the leader. All three stations I listened to driving to the finish line were giving the wrong information on him. And it was just amazing what happened. But anyway, that's initially how it started. And he was just saying the guys from the University of Tennessee. And that was, he didn't go to school there. He went to East Tennessee State in Johnson City.
Okay.
And I said to him, he goes to East Tennessee State in Johnson City, not the university. And I said, he's a very accomplished runner. And at this point, he was leading at the halfway point. And I said, you know, he is the NCAA champion this year in cross country, and he's not an American. He's from Ireland. And the guy looks at me like I got four heads. And he really did. Yeah. And but this was all done off mic, so to speak. This was during the commercial break.
Okay.
And he does the right thing. He starts firing questions at me left and right. You know, how do you know this? Where are you from? Were you a runner in school? What's your background? You know, and in other words, who is this guy to walk up to me and give me this information? Right. And he actually did maybe a smart thing. The engineer says, you're on the air in 10 seconds. He pauses. He looks at me and he says, what's your name? And I gave him my name. And he thought later, he said to me, I figured, you know, if you're telling me the truth, you'll repeat it again, and I won't hang myself if I'm just throwing stuff up on the air. Let you do that. So I repeated, you know, what I told him, and then he kept asking me good questions, and he throws it to commercial. He grabs my arm, and with fear all over his face, so help me God, he looks at me and he says, don't go anywhere. I don't know what I'm doing. The station sent me down here. He said, I've never been on the air before. I'm actually an engineer. And he actually said, I'm 26 years of age. We ran out of commentators on the race course. And he points up to the sky and he says, I'm talking about the flags unfurled and the wind and the size of the crowd. What do we do next?
Right. and that's how your career was born. Wow.
Absolutely true.
That's crazy. Yeah, because you were doing financial advising, right? Or
that's what I had my career in on Wall Street. I dealt with high net worth individuals, switched over to the what's called institutional departments, small departments that deal with Fidelity or John Hancock Insurance Company, major pools of money.
Mhm.
And then went to New York and actually helped start for two major firms, Lehman Brothers and Morgan Stanley, their high yield bond departments.
Okay.
So that's what my career was. And eventually I wound up managing money. But I never left that business, and the sportscasting I always treated as kind of a weekend thing.
Okay.
And I did a show for public broadcasting, just to put a period at the end of this. They asked me to do a track meet with Bud Collins, the tennis commentator, gave me a copy of the show. ESPN was born. I sent them a copy. I didn't know anybody, had no contacts. And they called back 6 months later and said, "We like what you did. We got 3 track meets to do in 1980. We'd like you to do them." And I'm still doing stuff for ESPN now.
Yeah, you were there at the very beginning, one of the few. Yeah.
I was.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, can you compare what was going on then to what goes on now, basically, with the technology and you didn't even have internet really back then to have the information that you have these days.
It was a tremendous amount of homework, as you could imagine. It still is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I did the ACC championships for ESPN's affiliate, the ACC network,
Mm-hmm.
indoors, one of the last events that they did live. And if you're doing the NCs, you do a lot of homework ahead of time, but you don't air all of the semifinals the day before. You might tape and show the distance medley relay, which is a Friday night event, and then Saturday the finals, but the whole show is 2 hours. Now, when I go do the ACCs, we're on for 9 hours.
It's a lot of content.
Can you imagine? There's so much you've got to know, and the homework goes. I mean, you could put in easily 30 hours of homework.
Yeah.
Before if you're trying to do it the right way.
Yeah, I remember for the book when we were going back and forth, you were researching the statistics about the race and the number of people that finished in 2018 and comparing it to other years. Like, there's a lot of you do a lot of extra homework that I don't think people understand or realize when you're a broadcaster what has to be done to actually keep talking and keep people interested, because I've watched your broadcast and you seem to always know every single runner in the race and have a background story about them.
I feel I owe it to people like yourself and the sport and people who love track and field. I want to create the wows. It is not about me. It never has been. It is about the athletes, what they've achieved, the effort they put in, interesting backstories that you find. And then you have to figure out whether you have time to highlight all of that based on how long they're on camera for, whether it's a 60-meter indoor dash and you're highlighting 2 people, can I wedge this story in? Or whether you're showing a 5K race and probably showing it maybe 60% of the whole race gets on the air between commercial breaks of a 5K or cutting away for the high jump, stuff like that. Right. So, it's a painting that you're putting together. You're putting together a whole montage, and you sit there and kind of build it in your mind. And when you've done it as often as I have, I don't have to write a lot of stuff down. I just know when I can fit pieces of the puzzle in the right way to make Vince look great, or Sam look great, or Diane, or whatever the hell it is.
Right. Yeah. No, I've watched your broadcast, and I love listening to your voice, because I associate your voice with track and field. Like, it's just because you've been at ESPN for so long. That's the voice that I'm used to, the voice of track and field.
Well, I'm glad you're not throwing popcorn at your screen.
But yeah, I mean, this would be what, about 44 or 45 Bostons this year. So you're going way back.
That's exactly right. Now, domestically, if they turn on the Boston Marathon, friends and family watching this of the runners that constitute Boston Buddies, they won't see me on the domestic show, which is a Comcast show. I do and have done for about the last 7 years the international telecast. 7 years ago, we combined both the domestic and the international as one. Mm-hmm. And then when Comcast bought NBC Universal about 4 or 5 years ago, they decided to make it 2 separate broadcasts. So I was asked to co-host the international show, and we go out to the whole world with about 200 countries.
Mhm. Yeah.
So if you
Yes.
live in Buffalo, if you live near the Canadian border anywhere in the United States, there's a good chance that you can watch our broadcast, which is commercial free, basically.
Right. And you can
So
get it online too. I think NBC Gold is it? At least NBC Gold had it last year, which you could listen to it and
that's
watch
a
it
good
online.
point that I frankly forgot and didn't even know at the time that they were showing it on NBC Gold.
Right. So one of the races I think that a lot of people always ask about is 1982 Duel in the Sun. You were obviously broadcasting that day, and you got to see it happen live. And what kind of strikes you about that race, or what do you remember about that race?
Well, it was one of the first things I think of was how warm it was that day. The temperatures in the forecast. Let me back up one step. The
Sure.
average highs and lows in Boston are roughly, obviously it varies, but 46 for a low in the morning, usually somewhere around April 20th. And the high temperature is probably somewhere around 57, 58 degrees. That's average. And
Hmm.
if it's anything but 3 days of the Boston Marathon, when you look back in the history, it has snowed and it has been as warm as 97 degrees when the race started. So it's shake your head time in New England in April.
Right.
I looked at it yesterday, as a matter of fact. I was talking with my wife and I just pulled up Boston, and it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I pulled it up, a week after the event would have been held. So in theory, a little warmer, and it was raining and 39 degrees.
Hmm.
Welcome to Boston.
Right.
So Salazar and those guys ran, and when they hit Wellesley, the temperature was like 74 degrees and a good almost 20 degrees warmer than normal. Sun was shining the whole time.
Hmm.
In the sun, the temperature is often 15 or so degrees warmer on your body when it's beating down on you. So the equivalent of in the 80s, maybe the high 80s, when these guys were trekking their way from Hopkinton to Boston, that was the weather. They went through the half-mile mark with a cluster of people, including Ed Mendoza and Bill Rogers, and the half split was 104 and change low, something like that, which meant that they ran just a little slower for the second half because it was one of the fastest times ever run on that course and a brilliant time for that era. And the last 9 miles, those guys ran alone. And kind of surged at different times. There were times Salazar had the lead and Dick Beardsley would push, and they kept challenging each other in the Newton Hills, but they were all alone and kept pulling away. I remember Lodwick being interviewed afterwards and saying, I just couldn't see them. And this is interesting. He said, I began to believe, as I had 6, 7, 8 miles still left to go, that they were way in front of me and I probably wouldn't see them because the crowd by the time I came into view was so totally quiet.
Wow.
They hadn't been applauding for a while.
Right. Right. Well, he was what, 3 minutes behind them.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a long time. Yeah.
It is. I mean,
Yeah.
especially for the marathon, you sit there and wait and wait. Imagine being at the finish line. I mean, you can go get a cup of coffee at Starbucks and come back
Right. But
to your place and not miss anybody.
this was also a time where there wasn't water on the course.
Yeah. What strikes me about that race is the commentary and what happened after 82. In interviews, Salazar has said, and this was amazing to me. Here is his quote: I was never the same after Boston 82.
Really?
He said workouts that I did before that were hard, that I could sail through, became a grind. He said I was tired. They were hard, and it never changed after that race. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I wonder did he attribute that to anything, or just the
the race and the weather and the effort he put into it, and the great time that they turned in considering the heat in that day.
Mhm.
I mean, this is one of the top times in 82. You're on 208 in Boston. For our viewers, I thought about this, but it's a good time to probably drop something in. Let me talk about the wind in Boston.
Sure.
On Boston Buddies, I don't read much about this point, so maybe it could be of value to people. At that time of the year in Boston, and I grew up in Newton, obviously one of the places everybody goes through. If you get a warm day, the bad news is that it's warm out, like Salazar's type stuff, 70, 75 degrees, even hotter in the sun. So you suffer. The slight plus is that you get a tailwind usually for most of the race.
Mm-hmm.
The winds come in at that time of the year from the south and the southwest. It is largely a southwest to northeast course. If you get cold weather and frequently a nor'easter or some rain, the good news is it will be in the 30s and low 40s and colder than normal, but you're probably going to get a headwind.
Okay.
And it is very consistently that way, Vince.
Okay. Well, yeah, the next year after that, 83, they had almost perfect weather, and they had almost 100 runners break 220 that year.
Yeah, and it is very rare to get what Geoffrey Mutai did, whatever that was, 12 years ago or so, when he ran one of the fastest times ever.
2011.
He had a tailwind.
Yep.
But it was cool.
Yeah.
So ironically, from the southwest at that time of the year, it wasn't warm weather coming in New England from the southwest. It was really below normal temperatures and sunny and cool. And so you had the most perfect conditions for Boston you could ever hope for.
Yep. That was my first year I ever ran it. It was 2011, because I remember that year. And he ran a 203, and Ryan Hall ran under 205, first American to do that on that course. But he really wasn't even close, which was amazing. He went out, he killed it, and Geoffrey Mutai just set the world on fire that day. It would have been a world record, yeah, if the course was certified, yeah. And that was the year Desi came in second by 2 seconds.
Right, and one of the thrills of Desi's race that gave me chills in the booth is I remember we went back for her race after it looked like Mutai was going to win. We cut away, and there was an MTA trolley just past Boston College at the foot of the base of that hill, and it's a flat stretch. But people at that point will frequently be able to watch the first half of the race on television, come out to cheer everybody on, and maybe go back in their house and watch the finish. So they knew Desi was up there. And at that point, you could hear on our air the crowd chanting, which I had probably never heard in 20 years, the chant USA, USA.
Yeah.
Oh, I got goosebumps. It was so cool. And she looked terrific, held her form really well, ran well, but got outkicked.
She was leading. She was leading in the last mile. Yeah, she was up there the whole time. That I really hadn't followed running even before that, and that was my first year in Boston. I remember thinking, oh, there's a USA women's runner actually competing, and she's close, and that really piqued my interest. And she was the one that I would follow in all the races thereafter. I was so happy for her in 2018 when she finally broke through and won the marathon. And what a year and what a day for her to actually win that race was 2018. As you know, it was just incredible.
Yeah, it really was. And it's pretty well known. Maybe not all of our viewers know that she stopped and she and Shalane had a conversation, and then in watching, I've watched that race on tape, and she really did wait for her. And then she ran beside her for a while, maybe saying to her, "You okay? What's the scoop?" All that stuff.
Right.
And then there's another part of the race where you can see her getting up and getting in front of Shalane and helping to tow her right back up to the lead group. It was very cool.
Right. She was very selfless, and she almost, was giving the race to Shalane, because she kind of was didn't think she had a chance to win it. She had said in post interviews that she didn't think she was going to finish because of the
Right,
weather.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why she said, I decided to wait. Why not help her and see what she could do? And it was pretty early in the race. I've also seen
Yep.
her in interviews say something interesting, which was with a smile on her face as she said it. She said, the tougher the conditions, the more I love it. Well, you know, when you're not as gifted at 10K and 5K and you don't have quite the speed of others, you're left to take the kick out of people. That's what you have to do. I used to have to do that as a miler. I didn't have great sprint speed. I could run at a national level, but guys with raw speed, faster at 400 meters, would almost always outkick me. So I understood what she meant and how she had to be particularly tough in the last third of the race to try and burn people off.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and that's what she did.
Now she has a you know, fiery little personality, you know. And does she ever you ever talk to her about, you know, becoming a color commentator or joining you in the booth?
No, I mean, because her career, I mean, go back to 2011 as an example. She was probably 26 then, 27.
Right.
You know, and you're looking, you're going to get, if you're the top 3 or 4 Americans, this is an interesting subject maybe for our viewership, but when you go Boston, Chicago, New York, or the other 3 world marathon majors overseas, there is 7-figure prize money, appearance money that's given out that is virtually never talked about. That's obviously a negotiation with the elite athlete coordinator in concert with somebody who runs the event. Like, how much money do I have this year? And they may say, I'm trying to get this person for X amount of dollars and all that. So if you're amongst the top 3 or 4, or you've made an Olympic team in the marathon and you're fit, maybe if you're from around the area like New England, or Amy Craig is training in Providence, or Emily Sisson's in Providence, you know, you could easily get $100,000 plus just to show up for that event. And obviously you key for it, but that plus shoe company bonuses, should you get first or second, you could go home with $250,000.
Right.
So it's a big payday, and you're not going to get in the booth.
Not yet.
No.
I would love to hear her once you know, she decides to hang it up. I'd love to hear her in the booth. She's got a great personality. Her Twitter feed is so funny. She's just so down to earth. And
yeah, she really is. You're right. You're right. And she can be edgy and she can have fun, and she'll joke about loving her wine and all that stuff.
Right. And bourbon, isn't it? Is that her drink? Bourbon?
Yeah, she's a bourbon drinker too.
Yeah. And then we actually, that year, obviously Yuki ran and won out of nowhere. Well, not out of nowhere, but you know, nobody really expected him to win that year. Yeah.
You're not far off.
Yeah.
You are not far off in that.
We're actually going to be talking with him tonight on our show. But yeah, he though had run a marathon on New Year's Day, which I think the conditions were actually worse. So I'm going to talk to him about it tonight. But he ran.
Are you familiar with the weather in that race or what happened?
I am familiar, but yeah, for our listening audience, maybe you want to tell the story there.
It's funny. When I was about 10 years of age, my dad said, we're going to build a summer house. And he and several friends actually built a summer house in Marshfield, Massachusetts. That is on the coast. It's south of Boston, if you're not familiar with it, by about maybe 40 miles.
Okay.
And that's the town that had the New Year's Day marathon that Yuki ran in. How he ever heard about it, I have no idea. That day was one of the most brutal in New England that year. And the wind chill was supposedly down close to 0. And they held the marathon. And I may be wrong here, but you'll get the idea. I live in the world of accuracy, but I have actually read that there was only one other competitor that showed up in the starting line with the temperature and the wind chill down close to 0. And they fired the gun and started the race, and they had 2 guys, I think, in it.
2 in the marathon. Yeah, that's what I've read. There was only 2 in the marathon. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I find that, like, when I first read that, I said, could this be right?
Right.
But they ran the race and they had a car following the leader, and I don't know whatever happened to the other guy, but Yuki wins that. Some amazing time. I want to say under 2:20 or 2:18 or something.
It was,
And
yes.
this was his fourth race in less than 4 months.
Mhm.
Stunning.
Right. And then he comes and runs Boston and horrible conditions and takes the prize.
I could not believe he won, Vince. And I thought, and I was amazed at the way also, and I remember staring at the TV set while we're on the air, and I'm in the middle of the commentary, and I could not believe that Joffrey Karui would run in the lead and break the wind. I'm going to guess for between the third and a half of the race, even when there was a pretty large pack. And Yuki would just go do the same thing and surge away from everybody on 2 or 3 occasions. Just shake your head stuff into that headwind.
Yeah, that's what I didn't when I was watching the replay there. I was surprised that they were out there because why not save your energy? Why not let somebody else do the work and draft? Yeah,
Absolutely 100% right.
yeah.
And
Well,
also the windbreaker that was being worn by Karui was white,
yes,
and it was almost functioning like a sail,
yeah,
if you know what I mean. The
yeah,
sleeves were billowing, and that just acts as a drag on you. There wasn't skin tight as it should have been,
right.
and he's out there in front at different times for miles. Other times he would tuck back in, but he far and away was the guy who should have won, but he didn't run tactically a good race.
Right. Yeah. It's basically like running with somebody pulling a rope behind you.
Good analogy.
Yeah. Uh, so something else that I wanted to talk to you about. We were talking about you do research, and you've been around runners for a long time, and we were chatting yesterday about high school and college athletes and how they fare academically in high school and college, just as being or there's just a connection between the track and field athletes and the grades and the accolades that they get in school.
Let me give anybody who's watching, or if you re-air this again at a much later date, let me just give you an opening sentence to hopefully get your attention. Track and field in high school and in college, and include cross country as a separate sport that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
On average, across the country, in both high schools and in universities, have the best academic students in all of college sports and all of high school sports. Now, you will find some schools where there will be swimmers or a soccer team that has better grades and so forth. But on average, it's cross country first, track and field right behind it academically, so that your child is learning teamwork, goal setting, discipline, hard work by
Mm-hmm.
being on a cross country team or involved in the sport of track and field, which is, of course, great preparation for life and what you will face when you get out of college. And I give talks at the high school level, and I've done it at the college level as well, in some cases to entire sports teams where I have to tweak it a bit what I say. But if you are writing an essay to get into college and submitting it to a university, make sure when you do that to consider talking about your experience as a runner on a track team or cross country team, and talk about what you learned, how many months of the year you actually trained, the total mileage you put in, how your times at whatever distance you ran improved each year, and what you learned from it. It's everything that somebody who is interviewing for admissions to a university or for a summer job or a full-time job will want to know about you. Male or female, it is key. And I contacted a major university, one of the top 30 in the country. And I asked for the admissions office. I called before 9 o'clock because I figured I'd maybe get somebody of importance before they started the day for meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And I explained the same thing I just talked to you in a smaller nutshell to the secretary that answered the phone. And I said, could I speak to somebody who admits people to your university? She puts me on hold, and the guy picks up the phone and he introduces himself. And I said, John, my name is Larry Rawson. And it turns out he's a jogger, likes track and field, knows me from watching on the air, and says, Larry, how can I help you?
Mm-hmm.
And goes on to say, I have told my department, he said, that if anybody writes an essay on their experiences as a runner in track and field and how it helped them, I want to read that resume.
Mm-hmm.
Then he said to me, it doesn't guarantee that we will let you into our school. He said, but I know that that person will be a success in whatever they do. Isn't that interesting? He had been dean of admissions for over 20 years at this university.
Mm-hmm. I believe it. I believe it. I mean, runners connect with each other, you know, and then there's a certain amount of respect that we have for each other, regardless of how well they perform or whatever. If they're a runner, they're a runner. And, you know, we seem to like to hear each other talk about it as well. So when I'm in a position where I can hire people as well. And I'll always throw it out there just to see, you know, in the interview, if they're a runner or not, just to try and connect with them. And it always helps. It kind of relaxes them, especially the ones that, you know, run. You can see the excitement, and you can see like I truly think it's a different type of personality for the people that enjoy running.
I think it develops your personality to be that way, though. In other words, you walk in, you could have you're just a kid, and then you begin to drink the Gatorade, and you start saying, gee, I really like this, and I'm going to stay up with these kids, or I'm going to get better. And you fall in love with the sport. And that's when things continue to shape yourself. And if you're a sophomore, when you start in high school, you realize I got 2 more years to do this. Gosh, these are great kids. My parents really like my teammates I brought home, you know, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give them examples. I don't say this idly when I throw that stuff out. This is after years of talking to coaches. This past year, Lance Harder, the head women's coach for track and field and cross country at Arkansas, won the NCAA Division I title. His teams have won outdoor Division I titles and indoors as well. And I said to him on the phone before the SEC championships indoor, rather in cross country this year, I was talking with his team, which was the #1 team in the country. And they did go on to win the NCAA title again this year. I said, Lance, tell me about your women academically. He said, Larry, I have 61 women on the team. He said, obviously we picked 10 or 12 to run in the meets, but I have 61 out for the sport. We don't cut anybody. He said their overall cumulative average, all 61 ladies, this knocked me over, was the highest average I'd ever heard. He said was 3.86 out of 4. And he said, with 3.86, we lead the university in all their sports academically on the women's side. The men's side is 330 to 340 normally. Women do a little better than men. Georgia this year, the men's cross country team led all sports teams at the University of Georgia academically on the men's side for the 8th year in a row. There's a Catholic Jesuit school in New York City that I'm familiar with and know the coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him on the phone, I said, Pat, tell me about your team academically. He said, Larry, we have a very strong track team. We have 1,075 boys in our school in the inner city of New York. He said, our team has 170 kids out for the team. He said, and I academically have 2 kids out of the 170 that have academic issues. And it just goes on and on and on. Yeah. I'm involved with 2 inner city schools in New York City where I've tried to help with scholarships. And they come from poor backgrounds. And I got with a new principal. She believed what I was saying. They decided to build up the track team. I told her how well I thought the kids would do academically. She sends me a note a year ago, and she says, it's exactly true what you said academically.
Mhm.
She said the entire team this past semester averaged 89. So I could go on and on of talking with many other coaches at the NCAA level, but the story's the same.
Right. So if it's a message to the parents. Try and steer your kids towards track and field or cross country. Yeah, there's something.
Exactly. You know, and you will every single day be building their character and their discipline and their success in life.
Yeah, that's great advice. Easier said than done. I have teenage daughters. So, they don't always listen. So how about this year? Is there any what do you think about the contenders this year in this year's race, both on the men's and women's side?
You know, I think honestly, I think it's a TBD.
Yeah.
In other words, it's probably a tough situation for Mary Kay Che, who does the elite athlete coordinating. You've already invited X number of athletes.
Yep.
And you did that with the idea that you would have no Olympians come to Boston. But now the date is September. The Olympics are going to be pushed out 8 months. Do you have any other money to bring up Jacob Riley or Galen Rupp? Or who could you bring up on the women's side that's not committed?
Right.
There's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts. How do the Kenyans in their own federation, what do they do? Do they encourage you not to run some other races? Or in Ethiopia, where they have more control, I wonder what the story is there.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be at all surprised to see some movement at the elite level of who finally steps on the starting line. And hopefully, cross your fingers, on September 18th, they do have the Boston Marathon.
Yes. Right now it's on schedule. So we should train as if it's going to run.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
Since the Olympics are pushed back and nobody's running anything this summer, hopefully they can bring in, the top elites. Who knows? Maybe get Kipchoge.
That might break your bank, though. Who knows?
Right.
Who knows? So people understand what goes on a little bit. Berlin does it a little differently than the other 5 majors. They will take their budget, whatever, and that's never announced, whatever it is, and divide it up between 2 top men or 2 top women that are trying to go for a record. That course is very fast and very flat. Mm-hmm. And that's where that money goes. Usually it's not spread out with 30 athletes invited with appearance money going to the top 15. It might go to the top 4 or 5.
Right.
London has a bigger budget than any of the other world marathon majors, so they can go deeper and get even the biggest names in numbers, more than most of the others. Mm-hmm. So again, it's never advertised how much, but that's why you sometimes see a little distortion among the world marathon majors.
Right. Well, they already announced Berlin's canceled, so the prize money's not there for them. So maybe a couple of them will float in towards Boston.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, we'll see.
Very good point.
I'm always amazed too about the wheelchair athletes that ride, and Marcel Hugues, is that how you say his name?
Yeah, I try and do it like they do it. And so they have a bit of a twist to the word. The right way, I think, to say it is Marcel Hugues.
There you go. I'm not going to.
It's almost like it's Hoooog. If you see my point.
Right. But I mean, if you had a runner that basically would win the races like he does, or Tatiana as well, like they have streaks, which you don't get people winning as a runner 7 or 8 years in a row. Whereas the wheelchair athletes, you've got some that are just dominant out there right now.
Well, Hoog has come through a huge stretch. He, a couple of years ago, I don't know if the record's still there, but speed is very important when you're a track athlete at, let's say, the mile. I mean, it really gets down to staying healthy, having a great attitude, great coaching, all the things that you know. But you need raw speed at, let's say, the 400 meters.
Yep.
I mean, running 1 minute and 43 seconds just off the world record was Hisham El Garouj. So why is he a great miler? Well, he trains for it, and he's a great 5K runner because he's got this incredible speed.
Mm-hmm.
And you could take that story and multiply it times 50.
Right.
I interview Matt Centrowitz when he was still competing at Oregon his final year at the NCAAs. And he had already won his heat, and the final was the next day. And I said, Matt, I've never asked you this, but have you ever run a 400 for time? And he starts to smile, kind of a wry smile. And he says, he said, I wanted to do it at Oregon. The coach wouldn't let me. He said in high school, I ran it, but that was 6 years ago. And he said, I think I've got good speed.
Mm-hmm.
And then he pauses and says, but in a slow mile, he said, I've run the last half in 1 minute and 50 seconds. I said to him, if you've got that type of speed, I don't need to know what your 400 is. You've told me how raw and great your speed is. And of course, he wins from behind in the marathon. I'm sorry, in the Olympic 1500 meter race.
Mm-hmm.
And he's had his share of injuries in the last couple of years, but nonetheless, speed is key. And,
yep.
We'll see what happens. But Hoog had the wheelchair world record for the 800 and the 1500, and then steps up to training for the marathon.
Okay. Didn't realize that. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have our own speed demons that are going to be going head to head this weekend in a 5K. We have the legendary Gene Dykes, 72-year-old world record holder, running he's shooting for a sub 19-minute 5K versus 30-year-old Emily Morley. So
wow.
Yeah, on Sunday morning. Yeah, maybe you could do the commentary. He's in Philadelphia. She's in Utah near Salt Lake City. So it's a virtual race, but they're doing it for charity. They each have a charity, and people in our group can wager on one person or the other. It's all for fun and for charity.
So he actually says he's going to try and break. He's 92.
He's 72. He's
72. I thought you said 92. That's how I was flipped out. But that's still extraordinary to try and do 6:20 a mile or 6:30 a mile at that age.
Yeah, he wants to break 19 minutes. That's his PR right now is 19:01, I think. So his goal is to break 19. So, and I know him. He'll do it. I'm sure he'll do it. He's got that mentality. He's tough. He's the one, like 2 years ago at 70, he ran a 2:54 marathon. That's down in Jacksonville near you. Yeah. So yeah, we're trying to do some of these types of fun races and things like that just to keep people's minds occupied and give them something to look forward to with everything else that's going on in the world. Obviously, it's affected you. All the events are basically canceled that you normally are commentating. What's next for you right now? Anything, or is everything still up in the air?
I'm just going to take a guess. There's the possibility of doing the ACC cross country championships and the SEC cross country championships. Those would be October events.
Okay.
Excuse me. I'm scheduled. I say I'm scheduled. I kind of never know, but I don't worry about it. I've been doing it for years and years in a row, the Chicago Marathon. And Carrie Pinkowski just calls me up and says, well, are you ready?
Okay.
But I think I'm on to do the Chicago Marathon, which is scheduled for October 11th.
Yep.
And obviously you cross your fingers there. I will be doing Boston September 18th if that goes off, and we have to cross our fingers there as well. So those would be the next 4 things that would take place in the next few months, or 5 or 6 months or something like that. So we'll see. But yeah, it was too bad to have it all canceled. I was going to help out emceeing a couple of events at the Boston Marathon for Paul Clarisi on his book, Born to Coach.
Yep.
talking about Coach Squires. And we had done this once before years ago, and Bill Rogers and Greg Meyer and a host of other top runners will be there to talk about the coach, including the coach himself. So
Yep.
that will be a fun time as well, connected to Boston.
Yep. Paul's a member of the Boston Buddies as well. I'm talking with him now, trying to get him on the show next week so he can talk
Good.
about the book.
Well, give him my best. Tell him I said hello, if you will.
I definitely will. Is there any other parting words that you might want to say to the Boston Buddies while you have their attention?
Well, I think we covered some hopefully interesting stuff.
Yep.
I'll leave a little tidbit with you that is a little tough to talk about on television. People get sensitive about it, and you're careful. The way I've heard commentators get around it a bit is to talk about what they call the power to weight ratio. And what they're really saying is, and I wish someone had told me this, Vince, when I was in college and running, and nobody ever did. I had a very, very good coach my freshman year who left at that point, but even he didn't say it to me, but I wish I had kept my weight down to a healthy level.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, not gotten too slender. But in college, there's a joke sometimes about the freshman 15, when you start eating the pizzas and the junk food, next thing you know, you're up 15 pounds.
Right.
Over my 4 years, I went from 147 to 162, right at 15 pounds. And an example of what I'm talking about, I said to Galen Rupp a couple of years ago in Boston, what is your weight right now? And he says, well, normally I weigh 133. He said, but for Boston, I'm down to 130.
Wow.
I say to Jordan Hesse, Jordan, who's just a delight, I think the world of her. I said, what's your weight? And she says, well, I'm 103, but right now I'm 100 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's only 3%, but you see the point that they're carrying whatever weight you weigh, you're pushing your pulse rate higher.
Right.
And it's good to weigh what you can healthily weigh,
right,
for a major race that you put so much time and effort into.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing what I know now, I would have kept my weight at 147, maybe 150, but I would have run faster than I did at whatever I did.
Right.
As long as you're healthy and you're not weak and you're strong and you do all the right stuff in training and you eat right, you'll be faster.
Right.
And I wish I knew that. And I did not know that in my day.
Yeah, I think they equate it to every pound's about a minute for a marathon. If every pound lost is about a minute off of your time for the equivalent. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I have a lot of minutes I could chop down off of my marathon. But again,
well, we're talking not only the average runner, we're talking the elites and what they do. And I just figured it's worth passing along to them,
right,
in case it rings the bell or they want to very carefully prune down, as you're saying.
Right. That's good advice. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. And I do appreciate your time today. This was great. I loved having you on. I know that you've got 43 years worth of Boston stories that you could tell us. So I'd love to have you back on again and talk about some other years of running. And I think our audience would love to hear it as well. So again,
well, you've done a great job with Boston Buddies. I mean, I'm on there with you, and I see the enthusiasm and the support that everybody gives each other. I wish all of them the very best when they get to toe the line in Boston, set their goals, and I just hope they feel euphoric when it's all over with. You're a great group of people.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We do run as one, as we say.
Great.
All right.
Thanks for all you do.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. My best, Vince.